Assalamualaikum and hi. My name is Nurul Syuhada binti Snarul and I will present about geographical in South Korea. South Korea is located in the south of the Korea Peninsula. The majority rules individuals Republic of Korea borders the country on the north, the East Ocean of Japan, on the east the China Ocean on the south, and the Yellow Ocean on the west. The Korea Waterway isolates it from the Japanese island of Tsushima on the southeast. The DMZ is a military campfire line that runs for about 150 miles from the mouth of the Han River on the west coast to a little south of the North Korean town of Kursk on the east coast, and generally follow latitude 38 the parallel. Next, I will present about the administration in South Korea. The Sixth Republic is the public authority that was set up after an establishment mandate in 1987. The government system, which had been highly centralized for most of South Korea's history, has become less centralized during the Sixth Republic. The President, Prime Minister, heads of executive ministry, and minister without portfolio make up the State Council, to which is the highest executive body in the country. He formerly worked for Roh Moo-hyun, a member of the National Assembly and the Democratic Party of Korea's leader, as senior secretary for civil affairs and chief of staff. Last but not least, I will present about economic sector in South Korea. South Korea went from being a tribal agrarian civilization to one of the world's maximum industrious international location at some point of that time. Materials and light assembly were the primary venture designed, trailed by greater business like iron and steel and synthetic substance during the 1970s. In 1996, Korea became a member of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, bringing it one step closer to being a developed country. Thus, noteworthy achievements, however, have been eclipsed at times by economic challenge brought on by both external and internal reasons. That's all from me.
Hello, my name is Nur Syadatu Putri binti Alias, and now I'm explaining about the chapter 2 in our topic, which is economic growth in South Korea and the benefits of economic growth. Okay, first, what is economic growth in general? According to Acamedio in 2021, based on economic terms, economic growth is defined as an increase in the value of a country's goods and services, resulting in increased profits for firms, where income rises when more jobs are created. Also, consumers will have more money and will lead to higher growth. Okay, next, how about the economic growth situation in South Korea? Okay, in the second quarter of 2021, the South Korea of gross domestic product is equal to 455,681 million US dollar, while the gross national product is more than 400,000 billion US dollar. So, in the percentage of South Korea GDP in 2021, was goes into services account, which is 46.7%, followed by manufacturing industry 32%. And next, what is the benefits of economic growth in South Korea? First is innovative economy. One of the most important benefits that contributed to South Korea is their achievement of South Korea R&D program that is larger compared of the leader is innovation based on R&D intensity, which are United States and Japan. Next, about 75% of all spending comes from industry and the rest comes from its government. Based on the figure, South Korea increasing its spending on R&D, and you can see in the year 2010, South Korea managed to surpass its benchmark countries. Other than that, despite its remarkable success in science and technology, South Korea continues to advance into R&D programs. The current goal is to increase R&D investments to 5% of GDP and focus on innovative, it including of space planning, nuclear power, military technology, artificial technology, pharmaceuticals, and biotechnology. Next, South Korea is now regarded as a global leader in digital economy. This is because they have become the first place in the world by the ICT Development Index in 2017. Other than that, they are ranked first in terms of internet access and broadband users, that is a huge achievement for South Korea. Second benefit is South Korea become one of the most important global high exporter. South Korea currently ranks 5th in the world in terms of merchandise volume, ahead France, Italy, and United Kingdom. In the 21st century, the country has surpassed the United States as the world leading shipbuilding, accounting for about 50% of the world global market. By value, South Korea exports 5 times more ships than China, the world's second largest ship exporter. And next, don't forget to mention about the Samsung Electronics and LG Enterprise are the most two of South Korea's largest electronic companies. But in the 2018, Samsung Electronics is the country's largest corporation with a total sales of $220 billion and their net income of $40 billion. It competes successfully with Apple as the world's largest manufacturer of television sets and mobile phones. That's all from me. Thank you.
Recession in South Korea. We will look at the first one is definition of recessions, recession situations, cause of recessions, and problem for recovering from recession.
Hello, I'm Mirza Jafina who would like to talk about the definition of recession in South Korea. What is recession? A recession is defined by economists as a decrease within the GDP for 2 consecutive quarters. Within the first 3 months of 2020, South Korea's GDP dropped by 1.3%. Consumer spending should gradually recover in keeping with Capital Economics Asia analyst Alex Holmes. However, the threat from the virus is unlikely to disappear completely, and a few social separation will almost certainly must remain in place. Meanwhile, global demand is just likely to recover slowly, which is able to weigh down the exports recovery.
Recession situation in South Korea during COVID-19. South Korea was one of the worst affected nations outside of China in the early stage of the epidemic, with roughly 900 new cases reported each day in February 2020. By April, however, an intensive monitoring and tracing exercise had reduced the daily count to single digits. When compared to the previous year, the GDP increased by 1.3%. However, the pace of increase was lower than the 2.3% increase observed in the fourth quarter of last year. In 2020, consumer expenditure fell 6.4% from the previous quarters, while export fell in 2%. South Korea was one of the first countries to be affected with the virus, and it had one of the greatest epidemics outside of mainland China. However, the number of daily infections has decreased drastically since early March 2020. The country has around 10,700 reported cases to date, with 238 deaths, according to Johns Hopkins University. According to Capital Economics, the Korean economy would fall by 6% in the second quarter compared to the previous quarters, and by roughly 3% for the years. South Korea's export-dependent economy was already dealing with a trade dispute with Japan and falling shipments to China when the virus struck. Cause of recession in South Korea. The first one is the decline in world trade and export due to COVID-19. Since 2003, this is the first time South Korea's economy has shrunk for 2 consecutive quarters. Therefore, the quarterly fall in 2020 is the steepest since 1998. Park Yang-soo, as director of the Bank of Korea, says South Korea's economy has fallen and the coronavirus outbreaks emerging in 2019 is accelerated the pace of the economic recessions. The governor of the Bank of Korea said it was important to let plenty of liquidity flow into the productive sector. Lee predicts that the country's GDP in 2020 will fall further from the central bank's May prediction of minus 0.2% growth. The second one is the contribution of the travel and tourism sector to South Korea's GDP fell in 2020. The Korean aviation industry has suffered huge losses because the number of people declined by 6.2% from approximate 1.4 million in 2019 to 1.3 million in 2020. This percentage was much lower than the global average drop of 18.5%. Graph demonstrate the slow climb, rapid increase, and steep collapse of incoming tourism in South Korea. In December 2019, 1.5 million visitors dropped to 61,000 visitors by July 2020. It shows the figure has plummeted dramatically. The third one is market and unemployment in South Korea. Since January 2020, the South Korean labor market as a whole has been shrinking. In March 2020, 1.6 million workers were forced to take unpaid vacations. In April 2020, 467,000 people lost their occupations. The overall unemployment rate increased to 4.2% in April and 4.5% in May. The economic crisis may boost the probability of unemployment, as it has reduced company sales and cash flow. As all job prospects dry up and employers better to accommodate their regular contract labor on some basis under COVID-19, the number of temporary workers dropped sharply by 500,000 in May 2020 from 7.5 million in 2019.
Hello, welcome back. Now, I would like to share to you about the problem of recovering of recession in South Korea. Let's get started. First of all, weaknesses of the services sector. Despite considerable government investment to boost the economy, the Central Bank of Korea cautioned that the return of COVID-19 in Europe and the United States pose a risk to the country economy in the fourth quarter. According to the BOK, strict social separation restriction in Greater Seoul in September 2020 may have slowed private consumption. As a result, economists believe the country's service sector is still poor, owing to the coronavirus separation from the industrial sector. Because of the efficiency of fiscal policy, there will be time lags and it will take time for the government to adjust its spending plan in order to raise demand. However, COVID-19 has accelerated the disconnect between the manufacturing and services economies, disproportionately hurting the services sector, and even as the manufacturing sector has managed to recover following the lifting of lockdowns, the services sector has remained subdued, according to a South Korean economist at Nomura. And according to the state-run Korea Development Institute, the US to China struggle for global leadership poses a risk to South Korea's economy because exports are highly dependent on the world's two biggest economies. The next one, financial pressure on the aviation industry. The airline sector has taken a particularly heavy impact. COVID-19 has merely contributed to the financial strains on the sector, especially budget travel, which is already under pressure because of boycotts on travel to Japan. Jeju Air, South Korea's biggest low-cost airline, was slated to buy Easter Air but decided against it because of the uncertainty about when passenger flight will resume. Easter Air's futures is now uncertain, and other low-cost carriers are in danger of going bankrupt or merging. When compared to the same period last year, domestic passenger traffic was down 38.1%, and internationally routes were down 97.9%. Besides, low-cost carriers cannot survive on local travel alone without the resumptions of international routes. In addition, traditional carriers have also experienced difficulties. Asiana Airlines was planned to combine with HTC Hyundai development. However, due to Asiana's quick growth in debt after agreeing to acquire the carrier in December, HTC Hyundai has requested a new due diligence examination of the transaction. If such discussions fail, the government might provide further funding in the form of convertible bonds, effectively nationalizing the airline. Next, the last one, the slowdown in export growth. South Korea's GDP contracted less than any other OECD country in 2020, thanks to robust export growth in the second half of the year. Despite the fact that export growth has slowed this year, investment in new production facilities has increased. Both indicators have a significant connection to chaebols. Semiconductors, automobiles, petrochemicals, and ships are among the major export commodities produced by South Korean businesses. Much of the increased investment may be ascribed to attempts by these businesses to expand their export capacities, such as Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix investment in new semiconductor factories. Despite there is only so much that can be anticipated from international demand to assist sustain the South Korean economy in the face of mounting caseloads. A dual-track recovery from SMEs and conglomerates, which despite their enormous economic importance, employ just 12% of workforce, will exacerbate South Korea's income disparity problem. Furthermore, if the virus continues to spread at its current rate, it might cause at least temporary slowdowns in producing items meant for exports, similar to what occurred to Hyundai, Samsung, and LG last year. As robust as South Korean exports have been thus far, demand interruptions are nevertheless possible as the Delta version expands overseas.
Hi, Assalamualaikum. My name is Mazliana. So here is the last part of our topic in this video, which is conclusion and recommendation. So I would like to give a summary and I will explain about first, can a recession be a good thing? Okay. A recession, or even worse, a lucrative depression, makes people sweat a lot. There is still a traditional profitable cycle in place. Asian countries are accustomed to being in recession, but they will quickly overcome this profit problem. This demonstrates that the Asian nation may be a good country with a stable currency, high living standards, and well-paying jobs. Many factors contributed to the country's recovery from the recession. First, terrain and inventiveness that creates a robust business environment fosters domestic demand and attracts global investment. These first factors means rupa bumi dan daya cipta yang mewujudkan persekitaran perniagaan yang teguh, memupuk permintaan domestik dan menarik pelaburan global. The country has a strong hold. They all play an important role in promoting investment, production, communication, and process. Aside from that, the Republic of Korea has placed a strong emphasis on technology. Second, I will explain about how to survive a recession in South Korea. Since South Korea has experience in the face of economic recession, we must want to know how they survive during a recession. In the second quarter, South Korean economic system entered a recession and the coronavirus epidemic affected export, ensuing in production, manufacturing, and social distance. Last year, South Korea turned into hail as shining instance of the way to use the economic coverage to deal with the latest exchange problems. Because coronavirus is located everywhere in the world, its miles are used as a version for virus containment. To address the escalating disaster, Seoul is taking extra competitive economic measures to bolster the South Korean economic system. When the disaster became a hit, South Korea turned into a hit with a transport surprise, while Chinese elements provider could not maintain up with demand. So I would like to share with you about factors that aided South Korea's quick healing from the disaster to normal budgetary. First, Korean authorities have especially trusted economic resources. Even earlier than the disaster, the Korean authorities saved its budget in check. Second, all through the healing, the authorities' competitive economic approach tainted the trust, openness, and effectiveness of numerous public mortgage assure schemes. This sentence means pendekatan ekonomi kompetitif pihak berkuasa mencerminkan kepercayaan, keterbukaan dan keberkesanan banyak skim jaminan gadai janji awam. These authorities led tasks and applications, on the opposite hand, clearly misplaced lots of their effectiveness as South Korea progressed. The government turned into reminded, effortlessly improve. Last but not least, I will explain about what can increase a long-run economic growth. The long term means all factors of production and cost are variable. In the long term, corporations can adjust all costs. The financial increase is a boom within the production of financial gadgets and services. In contrast, from one term to another, it has been shown, very theoretically and empirically, that technology improvement is the number one purpose pressure of the long-run increase. Along with it, the impact of human property can bring about a financial increase. The skills, training of tough painting strain have a right-away effect on the increase of the economic machine. An underutilized, illiterate and unskilled frame of people become a drag on the economic machine and might bring about higher unemployment. I think so that's all for our topic. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you understand our explanation from first and to the end of this video, and we sincerely appreciate for your attention in watching and hear our explanation, and that's bring us to the end. I would like to thank you so much for your time and interest for watching our video. Thank you. Bye.